The 15-year-old girl sat in the courtroom with a smile that sent chills down everyone's spine. While other teenagers were busy picking out dresses for prom or stressing over final exams, this girl was charged with killing her own mother in their quiet Oxford, Mississippi home. She believed her age would shield her, that a child couldn't be seen as a monster. But what the police found, video footage, text messages, and that calm smile upon her arrest, told a completely different story. When the prosecutor played the clip of Madison coldly saying, "Now it's quiet," after the gunshot, the courtroom fell silent. That evidence was enough to make everyone acknowledge that sometimes evil doesn't scream, it whispers and smiles. How could a teenage girl be so composed in the face of her mother's blood? And what turned a smart, quiet child into the symbol of fear known as the smiling teen of Oxford? That question haunted an entire community, forcing people to confront the dark corners of the younger generation's psyche. Because this crime didn't stem from a burst of anger or a moment of weakness, it was calculated, fueled by arrogance and a thirst for control. The victim, a devoted, gentle mother, was simply the first to stand between the girl and the warped sense of freedom she believed she deserved. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On the morning of Saturday, March 21st, 2009, in Oxford, a chilly morning with a misty sky and rows of oak trees standing still in the gentle breeze. The small southern town was still half asleep, with only a few people walking their dogs past the red brick houses lined up like a string of peaceful memories. At 418 College Hill Road, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the sound of the morning news on the radio. Elaine Cole, a math teacher at Oxford High School, was preparing to tutor students for a makeup exam. She carefully packed her gradebook into her bag, occasionally glancing up the stairs where her daughter's bedroom door remained closed. Upstairs, 15-year-old Madison Cole sprawled on her bed, earbuds in, her face expressionless. The music in her ears drowned out her mother's call. "Madison, come down for breakfast." No response, just the relentless beat of drums through her headphones. The teenager cast a cold glance at the confiscated phone on her desk. Its screen dark like a fading wound. Elaine walked up and opened the door without knocking, sparking the familiar clash between them. Not advice anymore, but a battle between generations. "You can't keep controlling me," Madison shouted, her voice breaking. "I'm not controlling you, I'm saving you from yourself," Elaine replied, trying to stay calm. In the silent seconds that followed, they locked eyes, as if standing on opposite sides of a chasm. The argument escalated, then a crashing sound rang out. A deafening gunshot tore through the morning stillness in Oxford. Birds on the roof scattered. Down the street, neighbors looked up from their newspapers, thinking someone was shooting at birds. In the house, gunpowder smoke lingered in the dim light. Elaine collapsed on the kitchen floor, her hand still clutching the hem of her white blouse. At the top of the stairs, Madison stood motionless, the small gun trembling slightly in her hand. No cries, no calls for her mother. She looked down, eyes empty, then sat in a chair like someone who'd just finished a tough assignment. Minutes later, a car engine roared outside. Derek Cole, her stepfather, had returned from an early shift. He opened the door, calling out, "Elaine, Maddie," no answer. Stepping into the kitchen, he froze. Elaine lay motionless, blood pooling in a red streak on the tiles. In front of him, Madison still held the gun. As Derek lunged forward, she spun around, her gaze icy, and pulled the trigger. The bullet grazed the wall, lodging in the fridge. He rushed her, wrestled the gun away, shouting, "My God, what have you done?" Madison didn't resist, only looked at him and whispered. She wouldn't stop. Derek, trembling, grabbed the phone, his hand stained with blood, and dialed 911. "My stepdaughter shot her mother. She tried to shoot me too." His voice choked with despair. On the other end, the dispatcher urged him to stay calm. But in that house, calm had died with the gunshot. Outside, police sirens wailed in the early morning chill, racing down the oak-lined street. A peaceful weekend day in Oxford had turned into an unimaginable tragedy. The sirens hadn't faded when red and blue lights swept across the front of nearby houses. Police and ambulances flooded College Hill Road, tires crunching on wet gravel. Neighbors peeked from behind fences, thinking they'd misheard as yellow crime scene tape was strung across the Cole house. In the yard, Madison sat on the wooden steps, barefoot, hands still smelling of gunpowder. When the first officer ran up and shouted, "Drop the weapon," she just looked at him, her voice even and cold. "It's done. I was defending myself." The words halted everyone for a beat. No panic, no tears, just the emptiness of someone who'd crossed something off a mental list. Inside, paramedics tried to revive Elaine, but the bullet to her chest was too close. Her heart had stopped. The kitchen still reeked of smoke. A broken mug lay scattered on the floor, the smell of coffee mingling with the metallic tang of blood. Police Chief Harlan crouched beside the white sheet, covering the woman's body, nodding to his deputy. "Seal the whole house. Grab the security camera too." A technician held up the recorder, its surface dusted lightly. Elaine had installed the camera to monitor the house while at work. Now it was a silent witness. On the porch, Derek Cole slumped on the steps, his hands bandaged, a scratch on his neck still bleeding. He spoke hoarsely. "I opened the door, and the gun was in my face. I couldn't think she'd do this." The officer nodded, jotting down the statement, but kept glancing at the girl being watched by two other cops. Madison stared straight at the ambulance, taking her mother away, her eyes without a flicker of emotion. A cold breeze blew through, lifting her hair, a faint smile playing on her lips. As the police car prepared to leave, camera flashes from local reporters began to flare. The first message spread on the internal network. "Teacher shot at home by her teenage daughter." Within an hour, the Oxford Eagle ran the headline, "Teacher killed by teenage daughter," in cafes around the town square. People read the paper, shaking their heads, some exchanging disbelieving glances. Elaine Cole, the math teacher at Oxford High? "She was so kind," a woman said, her voice trailing off. Oxford High School closed for a day to stabilize students' emotions. Madison's friends told reporters she was quiet, reserved, but smart. One boy recalled, "Last week she was smiling while presenting homework." Who'd have thought? The fragmented stories wove a strange picture. A girl no different from others, suddenly a killer. By afternoon, police finished collecting evidence. The small Smith & Wesson pistol, registered to Derek, was sealed in a plastic bag. One bullet fired, one still in the chamber. No signs of a struggle, just a single shot to Elaine's heart. "Doesn't look like self-defense," investigator Marcus Hale said quietly, eyeing the number 4 marker next to the dried blood. As Madison was escorted to the car, she didn't resist. A reporter shouted, "Madison, why did you do it?" She turned, gray eyes steady, lips curling slightly, as if hearing a bad joke. "Ask her," she said curtly, then looked away. The camera caught that moment, the faint smile amid the police cordon. A smile that chilled the town when it hit the front page the next day. In the back of the patrol car, Madison leaned against the window, watching the Oaks pass by. The officer beside her asked softly, "Do you want to say anything?" She replied, not looking at him, "She'll never yell again." He fell silent, gripping his notebook tightly. Outside, Oxford sank into a gray afternoon, the last rays of sun filtering through the trees onto a sign reading, "Welcome to Oxford, a quiet place to live." Beneath that slogan, the final siren faded, carrying the chilling echo of a morning that could never be undone. That afternoon, as the sun dipped behind Oxford's red brick houses, the Lafayette Police Department's investigators began reconstructing the scene. Detective Marcus Hale, with over a decade of experience in domestic violence cases, sat before a laptop in the evidence room. The USB from Elaine Cole's security camera was plugged in, showing grainy footage with slight static in the corner. The first image was a familiar morning scene, light streaming through curtains, steam rising from the coffee pot. Then, Elaine's voice, high and trembling, "Madison, don't you dare, The gunshot rang out almost immediately, making everyone in the room flinch. After the shot, an eerie silence followed, only broken by footsteps and shallow breathing. Marcus froze the video on the final frame. Madison standing in the kitchen, gun still smoking, staring into space. No struggle, no cries for help, no justification. When the forensics team finished, Hale revisited the scene. On the dining table, only one chair was out of place, and a shell casing lay near the rug's edge. No signs of a fight, no smashed furniture beyond a few broken porcelain shards. Everything pointed to a quick, clean, deliberate act. He crouched, staring at the dark, dried blood on the tiles, feeling the scene was too cold for a family accident. In Madison's room, the desk lamp was still on. Papers and books were neatly stacked. Unlike the image of a reckless teen, Hale flipped open a thin black notebook. Her diary, small, precise handwriting read, "Freedom is silence." In the page's corner, another line in red ink, "She'll understand one day." Hale noted it, closing the book carefully. He opened Madison's sealed phone, its screen showing text to someone named Riley Martin at 7:58 a.m. "She's pushing me again. She'll listen after tonight." The final message was sent 15 minutes before the gunshot. Marcus sighed. These weren't the words of a scared child. They were a declaration, a calculated plan. He added to the report, intent clear, emotional detachment evident. In a brief interview at the station, Derek Cole spoke wearily. They'd been arguing a lot lately. Elaine was worried about bad influences. Madison kept saying her mom didn't understand her. He looked down, voice breaking. "I didn't think she'd actually do it." The next day, Hale and a female investigator knocked on neighbors' doors. Jean Carter, who lived across the street, opened her door, still shaken. They fought every week. Elaine's voice carried into the yard. She'd say, "Madison, you need help," and the girl would scream back, "I don't need anyone's help." She paused, shaking her head. "I thought it was just normal mother-daughter stuff. If I'd known it was this serious." Her words hung in the air, a belated confession from the neighborhood. At Oxford High, Hale met a math teacher, Elaine's close colleague. The slim woman, with neatly tied hair, spoke softly. Elaine said Madison had changed, gotten quieter, writing weird philosophical stuff. She worried it was a rebellious phase. Hale asked, "Was Madison bullied or struggling at school?" "No, she was respected. But I once heard her say something chilling. People are only free when no one tells them what to do." Back at the station, Hale reviewed the video again. Each detail reinforced that this wasn't impulsive. Elaine approached, voice trembling. Madison stepped back, raised the gun. No defensive moves from the mother, no attempt to stop her. One clean, cold shot. The girl didn't run, just looked at her mother's body. Per the video's timestamp, she then went to the living room, sat down, and opened her phone. The entire sequence took less than 3 minutes. "No struggle, no panic," Hale said, in a team briefing. She knew exactly what she was doing, and was unnaturally calm. A young officer shook his head. "Can a 15-year-old do this?" Marcus replied, voice low. "We just saw her do it." As evidence piled up, video, text, diary, statements, it formed a single story. Madison wasn't cornered. She'd prepared for that moment. She chose when Derek was gone, chose a spot with a camera to record it, and sent texts beforehand, like a manifesto. That night, as headlines read, "Oxford Teen's Motive Under Investigation," Hale sat at his desk, staring at the copied diary line. "Freedom is silence." He wondered what a 15-year-old was thinking when she wrote that. Freedom from whom? Her mother? Love? Or her own conscience she was about to destroy? Outside, Oxford sank into darkness, streetlights glowing on old oaks, wind whistling through old roofs like an endless sigh. In the room, Marcus Hale closed the file, saying to his partner, "We're looking at premeditated murder, not an accident, not a breakdown. This was calculated." That cold, certain statement closed the first phase of the investigation, opening the path to a trial Oxford would never forget. 3 days after the shooting, a light rain fell over Oxford, as if trying to wash away the heavy air enveloping the town. News of the case had spread across Mississippi. The photo of Madison in the patrol car with her faint smile became an icon, sparking both outrage and confusion. That Tuesday morning, police learned she was at her aunt's house on the southern outskirts. Detective Marcus Hale went with 2 officers. The small house had a leaf-strewn yard, and Madison sat on the porch steps, hands in her gray hoodie pockets. When the patrol car stopped, she didn't run or look up. Hale approached, voice low and restrained. "Madison Cole, you're under arrest for first-degree murder." She looked up, eyes empty, and asked softly, "Did they print it yet?" As if talking about a news article, not an arrest warrant. Hale signaled for an officer to cuff her. The cold metal clicked. She didn't react, only turned to the reporter's camera waiting by the road and said loudly enough for all to hear, "Am I famous now?" A reporter instinctively lowered his camera, eyes stunned. That quote became the caption under every photo the next day. At Oxford Police Station, Madison was taken to Interrogation Room 2, a narrow space with gray walls and a cold steel table. Marcus Hale entered, carrying a thick file labeled in red. Homicide March 21st, 09. Cole, Elaine. He set it down, sitting across from the 15-year-old who leaned back, legs crossed, looking like a student waiting for recess. Hale began gently, trying not to make her withdraw. "Madison, I need you to help me understand what happened that morning." She looked straight at him, gray eyes dull, and asked, "Have you seen the video?" "Yes," Hale replied. "Then you already know." He paused for a few seconds, then asked, "Why did you do it?" Madison slowly shrugged, her voice almost a whisper. "Because she wouldn't stop." "Stop what?" Hale pressed. "Talking, controlling, breathing," she listed, voice flat and cold. "She wouldn't stop being her." Hale studied her, searching for any sign of emotion, but found only emptiness. He shifted gears. "You know she's dead, right?" Madison tilted her head, like someone hearing a weather report. "They told me," she said. "And?" Hale waited. Madison shrugged again, lips curving slightly. "Then she can't yell anymore." In the silent room, her words landed like a stone. Hale saw the light reflect in her eyes. No tears, just a metallic glint. He closed the file, speaking slowly. "Madison, what you say can be used in court. Do you want your lawyer here?" She gave a faint smile. Lawyers talk too much. Over the 2-hour interrogation, Madison answered every question with short, cold responses, showing no remorse. When Hale asked if she feared arrest, she said, "People are talking about me, aren't they? That's what matters." He asked, "Do you understand the consequences of what you did?" "Of course. She's gone. I'm here. That's the trade." Hale noticed that whenever her mother was mentioned, Madison didn't flinch or get emotional. She only shifted tone, as if recounting an unrelated story. At one point, during a long silence, she suddenly asked, "Do you have kids, detective?" "Yes." "Then you know how loud they can get." The comment made him pause. She saw his reaction and gave a slight, triumphant smile. Hale stepped out to compose himself. Through the one-way glass, his colleague, Officer Trish Myers, whispered, "This girl isn't normal." Hale replied, "No, she's very normal, just empty inside." He returned, watching Madison spin a water cup on the table. "Do you want to say anything to people?" "Tell them she started it," she said, not looking up. "And tell them I finished it." The interrogation ended near midnight. Madison was taken to juvenile detention. As the officer opened the cell door, she turned and asked quietly, "Will they let me see the papers tomorrow?" The guard frowned. "No way, kid." She shrugged, stepped inside, a faint smile still on her lips. Marcus Hale returned to his desk, opening his notes. Subject displays narcissistic traits, no remorse, emotional flatness, understands legal implications. He sat quietly, then said to Myers, "This isn't madness, this is pure arrogance." Outside, rain fell steadily on the tin roof, down the road to the Cole house, where days earlier, a gunshot shattered Oxford's peace. In the dark, Hale's pen scratched final notes. Motivation unclear, but patterns suggest control and defiance. Case to be handed to district attorney's office for prosecution. When he closed the file, the last image in his mind was her eyes. Eyes without guilt, without fear, only curious about how the world would react to the story she'd created. 2 days after Madison's detention, the case file was officially sent to the Lafayette County Prosecutor's Office. On the thick file's cover, Cole, Madison, Homicide, Oxford, Mississippi, stood out in red. The recipient was Prosecutor Victoria Ramos, a seasoned prosecutor known for her unrelenting approach to juvenile crime cases. In Oxford, they said Ramos feared no one: politician, armed criminal, or a 15-year-old girl with a chilling smile. In her small fluorescent-lit office, Ramos played the security camera footage, the key evidence sent by Detective Hale. The grainy video was clear in every detail. Elaine Cole stepped forward, voice trembling but firm. "Madison, don't you dare." Then the gunshot, a harsh sound echoing off the brick walls. Madison didn't scream or run. She just watched her mother fall and stood there. Ramos replayed those 4 seconds until the gunshot sound throbbed in her head. She leaned back, muttering, "This is not madness. This is motive." That afternoon, Ramos held an urgent meeting with the investigative team. Detective Hale presented the full file, from the Freedom is Silence diary to the text to Riley. "She'll listen after tonight." Ramos flipped through the pages, eyes cold and focused. "This isn't a child acting in panic," she said firmly. "She chose the time, the method, and left a message. We'll prove the defendant knew exactly what she was doing," a young assistant asked nervously. "But she's only 15. Will the public object if we push for a harsh sentence?" Ramos didn't look up, replying curtly. "Age isn't an excuse for murder." She ordered the forensic team to prepare all documents to request the court try Madison as an adult. 2 days later, a press conference was held on the steps of the Lafayette County Courthouse. The early spring wind cut sharply, but dozens of reporters crowded together, microphones raised high. Ramos stepped forward, her black hair neatly tied, wearing a charcoal coat. Her voice rang clear through the loudspeaker. "Justice does not discriminate by age. The evidence we have shows that Madison Cole's actions were deliberate, calculated, not impulsive. We will prove the defendant knew exactly what she was doing." The phrase "knew exactly what she was doing" was quoted verbatim in every newspaper the next morning. The case's allure skyrocketed. National TV networks descended on Oxford, setting up tents outside the courthouse. Images of Madison in handcuffs, head slightly tilted, a faint smile on her lips, appeared on every news broadcast with the caption, "The Smiling Teen of Oxford." From then on, that nickname became the haunting headline tied to the case. Criminologists debated on TV about the narcissistic juvenile offender, a young criminal with traits of narcissism. One psychologist commented, "She smiles not because she doesn't understand what happened, but because she believes she's the center of the story." The prosecutor's office began receiving dozens of letters from people nationwide. Some pleaded for leniency, others demanded harsh punishment. One parent wrote, "If that girl is spared because of her age, how do I teach my kids that murder is wrong?" Pressure mounted on Ramos, but she didn't waver. In an internal meeting, she told her team, "Our job isn't to punish a child. Our job is to protect society from children who think they can kill and be forgiven." For the defense, the court appointed Stephen Carlson, a lawyer experienced in defending juvenile offenders, known for persuading juries with emotion. Carlson reviewed the case and knew his only strategy was the mental illness defense. He told the press, "We cannot judge a 15-year-old girl with the same eyes we use for an adult killer. We must consider her mental health." Ramos immediately countered, "We cannot call cruelty a disease." The media followed every development. Each time Madison was escorted from detention, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing relentlessly. She seemed to know she was being watched. She walked slowly, head tilted, lips faintly curved, as if performing for an invisible audience. One reporter recounted, "When I asked if she regretted it, she looked straight into the camera, smiled, and said, "Why should I?" That image aired everywhere, sparking a wave of outrage. Meanwhile, at the prosecutor's office, Ramos and Hale continued reviewing every detail. She ordered a handwriting analysis of Madison's diary, comparing it to the note left on the table. "She'll understand one day. This shows clear awareness of her actions and their consequences," Ramos said, pointing to the word understand. She wasn't panicked. She wanted to be understood by killing. Hale nodded, his face heavy. That night, as the courthouse closed, Ramos stayed in her office, the lamplight illuminating her tired face. She replayed the video once more, hearing the gunshot and the heavy breathing that followed. It wasn't fear, it was relief. She turned off the screen, looked out the window at the distant town lights, and said to herself, "This is not madness, it's ego." The next day, the case file was officially submitted to the court. The first line of the indictment read, "Defendant Madison Cole, 15, is charged with first-degree murder. The act was determined to be deliberate, not driven by psychological distress, and involved cognitive self-control." As Ramos's signature dried on the final page, the smiling teen of Oxford case entered a new chapter, no longer just a story of a girl and her mother, but a confrontation between justice and a chilling smile that unnerved the nation. After the indictment was filed, the prosecutor's office began preparing for trial, and Oxford became the epicenter of Mississippi. Victoria Ramos worked relentlessly. Her desk was a sea of papers, photos, reports, and a hard drive containing the fateful video. Ramos reconstructed the entire sequence, from the moment Madison drew the gun to the text sent to her friend before the crime. In an internal meeting, she pointed to the screen, frozen on the frame of Madison standing still, gun lowered, eyes empty. "This is the moment she realized what she'd done," Ramos said evenly. "And still showed no fear. That's not illness. That's awareness." The prosecution team worked day and night to solidify their argument. Madison's actions were not impulsive, but deliberate and calculated. Ramos tasked Detective Hale with compiling all technical evidence, the video, diary, and phone text history, into a single report. Timeline of premeditation. Every detail aligned. Madison sent the text, "She'll listen after tonight," 15 minutes before the shot. The diary entry. "Freedom is silence" was written 2 days prior. The gun was taken from her stepfather's cabinet the night before. Each piece, when strung together, painted a picture of a planned crime. Meanwhile, defense attorney Stephen Carlson didn't waste time. He knew Ramos was a formidable opponent, and her evidence was nearly airtight. His only way to save Madison was to convince the jury she wasn't fully in control of her actions. Carlson contacted a psychiatrist in Jackson, Dr. Howard Bell, who had worked on multiple cases involving juvenile paranoid disorders. After 2 sessions with Madison in detention, Bell issued a preliminary diagnosis. The patient shows signs of acute paranoid disorder, possibly hearing commanding voices. Carlson seized this as a lifeline. He knew that planting even a seed of doubt about her mental capacity could open a chance. In subsequent meetings, Carlson tried to get Madison to show emotion. "You have to let them see you're scared, Madison," he said patiently. She shrugged. "If they want to be scared, let them. I don't act. If you don't help yourself, I can't help you," Carlson replied. Madison tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Who said I need help?" Her response sent a chill through him. Alongside the legal battle, police continued expanding their witness investigation. A key figure was Riley Martin, Madison's best friend. She was brought to the station one late weekend afternoon. In the cold, brightly lit room, Riley sat across from Detective Hale, hands clasped tightly, voice trembling. "I don't know anything, really. That day she just texted, told me to come over." Hale spoke gently. "We know Madison trusted you the most. You just need to tell the truth." Riley looked down, hair covering half her face. "I'm not sure. I'm scared she'll hate me." Hale sighed. He knew Riley was holding something back, perhaps a comment, an action, or a detail that could shift the case. But he didn't press further, not yet. On television, talk shows about the case aired constantly. A Jackson host opened, Is she a demon in a girl's form or a victim of school pressure? A sociologist guest said, "We're seeing a generation warped by social media, expectations, and loneliness." Another countered, "No, this is pure malice. Don't turn a killer into a symbol." In university cafes, students debated loudly. Some felt sympathy, others deep hatred. Oxford had never been so divided. At Meridian Juvenile Detention, Madison seemed oblivious to the storm outside. Guards reported she read books all day, occasionally laughing to herself. When a TV reporter was allowed to photograph the facility, Madison appeared in a gray uniform, hair tied high. As the camera turned to her, she pursed her lips, tilted her head, and flashed her familiar smile. That photo graced the cover of People Weekly. Under the bold headline, "The Smiling Teen of Oxford Awaits Trial," Ramos saw the cover the next morning at a newsstand near the courthouse. She set the magazine down, exhaled, and returned to her office. "She's become an icon," Hale said, bringing more files. Ramos replied, voice low, "We'll pull her back to earth." She opened the trial plan, tapping the desk. "We'll walk the jury through every piece of evidence, video, diary, texts, and her demeanor. It all says one thing: she wanted to be remembered." Across town, Carlson was crafting his own strategy. He knew Ramos wouldn't slip easily. In a memo to his legal team, he wrote, "Focus on age and psychology. Emphasize Madison's pressures, strict mother, loneliness, adolescent emotional turmoil. Bring Dr. Bell as the first witness." He believed that swaying even one juror's sympathy could spare Madison a harsh sentence. But when he visited his client in detention, Madison only asked, "When's the trial? I can't wait to hear what they say about me." Carlson looked at her, sighing. In those gray eyes, there was no fear, just the cold curiosity of someone waiting to see how her story would be told. On the morning of June 7, 2009, Oxford woke to a thick atmosphere. On the main boulevard, news vans lined up, cables and antennas sprawling across the courthouse lawn. Locals gathered early, crowding along iron fences to catch a glimpse of the girl dubbed the Smiling Teen of Oxford. Inside, Courtroom 3 was packed. Morning light streamed through high windows, reflecting off a wooden plaque reading, "In God We Trust." The jury sat in neat rows. Reporters, courtroom sketch artists, and the victim's family quietly filled the audience seats. The air was both solemn and tense. A heavy silence blanketed the room awaiting a trial that everyone knew would change Oxford forever. When the door opened, Madison Cole entered with two officers. She wore a simple white dress, hair neatly tied, a thin silver necklace around her neck. For a fleeting moment, without context, one might mistake her for a student receiving a scholarship, not a murder defendant. But then camera flashes from the press section flared, and Madison gave her familiar smile, the smile that chilled the room for a beat. She didn't bow her head or shy away. As she was led to the defendant's table, she glanced at the audience, her eyes pausing on Derek Cole, her stepfather, sitting with his head down, hands clenched. She smiled at him, tilting her head slightly, like greeting an old acquaintance. Derek looked away, lips trembling. Judge Eleanor Watkins struck her gavel 3 times, her voice stern. "The Lafayette County Court officially opens the trial of Madison Cole, 15, charged with first-degree murder." The jury of 7 women and 5 men, averaging over 40 years old, stared intently at the girl at the defendant's table. No one spoke, but their eyes betrayed a mix of shock and fear, for at that age, Madison didn't resemble the killer they'd imagined. Prosecutor Victoria Ramos stood, stepping to the center, her dark blazer sharp, eyes icy. Her voice was steady, not loud, but commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you'll hear a story that's hard to accept. A story of a 15-year-old girl, fearless, remorseless, and fully aware of her actions. Madison Cole is not a panicked child. She is a calculated killer." Ramos paused, locking eyes with Madison, then turned to the jury. In a few short minutes on the morning of March 21st, Elaine Cole, a mother, a teacher, was shot dead by her own daughter. Not out of fear, not due to mental breakdown, But because Madison believed that, through this act, she would be heard, Ramos paced, pointing to a large screen set up. You will see the video, you will hear the texts, and you will understand, it was all prepared. Madison Cole chose the time, chose the victim, and then chose to smile at the world. Her final words, "She smiled after the gunshot," echoed in the room like a cold slash. A few in the audience gasped softly, pens scratching furiously. As Ramos returned to her seat, defense attorney Stephen Carlson stood, adjusting his glasses, stepping slowly onto the wooden floor. He knew he faced a mountain of evidence, but understood this case hinged on emotion, and he had to plant the first seed of doubt. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Carlson began, voice soft and low, "you just heard a terrifying story, but there may be another story about a girl who lost control of her mind." He pointed to Madison. "Madison is not a monster. She is a child, 15 years old, an age where emotions shift hourly, where the world can collapse from a single adult's glance. Madison lived under pressure, in loneliness, and on that fateful morning, she acted in delusion." Carlson paused, scanning the room for sympathetic eyes. "We will prove Madison suffered from juvenile paranoid disorder, confirmed by psychiatrist Dr. Howard Bell. Her actions were not a conscious choice, but the result of an undiagnosed pathology." He looked at Ramos, offering a slight smile. "Justice isn't just punishment. Justice is understanding." Ramos met his gaze without blinking. She didn't need to counter yet. She knew the evidence would speak for her. But as Carlson turned back to his seat, Madison leaned forward, giving a faint smile, as if the entire debate was merely the opening act of a play she'd memorized. Throughout the opening statements, Madison showed no tension. She sat upright, eyes on the jury. When Ramos said murder, she blinked, then smiled faintly, a reaction that made some in the room shudder. A female reporter noted, "The smile is still there, calm, practiced, terrifying." Judge Watkins called a 10-minute recess to prepare the video presentation. In that brief pause, reporters flooded the hallway, calling their newsrooms. One said into her phone, "She smiled." Right when the prosecutor said her mother was killed, she smiled. The news spread on social media within hours, and the smiling teen flooded the airwaves, as if the case had outgrown the small Oxford courtroom. When the trial resumed, Madison whispered something to Carlson, then looked up, her gaze fixed on the jury. In that moment, a middle-aged woman in the third row shuddered. She later said, "It felt like the girl was looking through me, not begging for mercy, but waiting to see how I'd react." Ramos observed it all from the prosecution table. She scribbled 4 words in her notes: "Confidence as weapon." That smile, that gaze, was the strongest evidence that Madison Cole knew what she was doing and was proud of it. On the second day of the trial, the courtroom dimmed as the screen was lowered for the defense's presentation. Stephen Carlson stood, adjusting his tie, nodding slightly to the jury. He knew today was his only chance to plant doubt. If just one juror believed Madison wasn't fully aware, she might escape a harsh sentence. He called his first witness, Dr. Howard Bell, a psychiatrist from Jackson, with 20 years of experience with juveniles. Bell took the stand, tall and thin, his thick glasses reflecting the light. Carlson began in a low voice, "Dr. Bell, what did you find during your evaluation of Madison Cole?" Bell placed his hand on the microphone, his voice even and dry. "I observed signs of juvenile paranoid disorder. Madison believed her mother was controlling her mind, and she often heard her mother's voice even when she wasn't there." The courtroom fell silent, only the sound of reporters' pens scratching. Carlson nodded, pacing a few steps. "So you're saying Madison wasn't fully grounded in reality at the time of the crime?" Bell replied, "Correct. In her perception, her action was a way to end mental torment, not a deliberate crime." He turned toward Madison. "She told me, I just wanted the voices to stop. I believe she genuinely believed that." Carlson returned to the defense table, placing a hand on Madison's shoulder. "You see," he said, voice thick with emotion, "Madison is not a monster. She is a sick child, A child who wasn't helped in time, and the result was tragedy. All she needs is treatment, not punishment. During Belle's testimony, Madison played her role perfectly. She sat hunched, clutching a tissue, occasionally bowing her head, as if holding back tears. When Carlson mentioned her childhood and pressure from a strict mother, she slowly wiped her eyes. Cameras clicked throughout the room. Some reporters noted, for the first time the smiling teen didn't smile. Carlson continued. Elaine Cole was a devoted mother, but also overly strict. Madison grew up under pressure, grades, image, perfection. When she couldn't take it, her mind broke. That's when pathology took over. He paused, exhaling as if suppressing emotion, then said, "If you convict Madison as an adult, you're convicting every child struggling with their mental health." The jury sat in silence. A middle-aged woman in the front row looked down, avoiding Madison's gaze. For a moment, the courtroom was steeped in a somber, sympathetic air, until Prosecutor Ramos stood up. Ramos stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "Dr. Bell, you say Madison heard her mother's voice in her head." "Yes," Bell replied. "And those voices commanded her to do this horrific act. Do you think someone in a delusional state could time a text like that?" Bell hesitated, his voice softer. "I can't say for certain." "Thank you, I think we all understand." Ramos turned to the jury, her voice hardening. "This wasn't delusion, this was a plan," she said. "She'll listen after tonight, because she decided to kill her mother that night." There were no voices, only cold calculation. The courtroom grew thick with tension. Carlson moved to object, but Judge Watkins signaled Ramos to continue. "A truly paranoid person would be afraid, disoriented," Ramos said. "But Madison Cole was different. She chose a white dress for court, smiled when escorted, and today, she sits there, watching you like it's a play." She returned to the prosecution table, pulling out the photo of Madison from detention, the one on People Weekly's cover. She held it up. "Is this the smile of a sick person, or the smile of someone who knows she's being watched?" Madison looked at the photo, lips twitching, and a few in the audience shuddered. Carlson stood to object. "This argument is emotional, not based on expertise." Ramos didn't look at him, only said, "Emotion is something Madison Cole never had." The statement silenced the room. Judge Watkins struck her gavel, pausing the session for 5 minutes. Madison sat still, her gaze fixed on Ramos, the corner of her mouth curving slightly. The smile returned, thin as a blade. Hale, seated at the back, quickly noted, still smiling, "Control." When the judge returned, the air remained thick. The jury said nothing, but their eyes showed wavering. Ramos knew she had cracked the emotional wall. Carlson tried to build. The second day ended with an unforgettable image. Madison stood, adjusted her dress, turned to the press section, and smiled. No longer fragile, no longer tearful, a confident smile, as if she'd just claimed the starring role in a play the world was watching. The next morning, the trial entered its third day. Oxford's sky was overcast, clouds pressing low on the Lafayette County Courthouse. Inside, the atmosphere was dense. Everyone knew today would be pivotal. The prosecution would present direct evidence from the scene, the video capturing the entire crime. Reporters packed the back rows, with townsfolk standing in the hallway to hear through loudspeakers. The jury was seated, faces tense. Madison Cole entered, still in yesterday's white dress, hair neatly tied, wrists lightly cuffed. She sat at the defendant's table, casually looking up at the large screen in the room. Not a hint of fear. Prosecutor Victoria Ramos stood, holding the remote. Her voice was firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to see is footage from the security camera in Elaine Cole's home, recorded on the morning of March 21, 2009. This is undeniable proof of what truly happened." She signaled the technician to play the video. The room dimmed under the screen's blue glow. The first sound was a kettle hissing, soft footsteps, and a woman's voice, tired but gentle. "Madison, please, don't do this again." Then a curt reply from the girl, "Stop telling me what to do." A brief silence followed. A thud, the clank of metal hitting a table, then Elaine's sharp voice, "Madison, Don't you dare. A gunshot cracked, loud and dry, startling some in the courtroom. A sharp breath, the sound of something collapsing. Then, silence. In the video, Madison stepped back, looking down at her mother's body. She stood still for seconds, then said softly, her voice chillingly calm, "Now it's quiet." Those words echoed through the speakers, clear, cold as metal. In that moment, the packed courtroom fell deathly silent. So quiet you could hear a pen drop on the tile floor. Ramos froze the video on the final frame. Madison leaning down, the gun dangling in her hand. Dim light illuminating her blank face. She turned to the jury, her voice low but weighty. "You just heard the defendant's own words. Now it's quiet. That's not the sound of fear. That's the sound of satisfaction." A panicked person would scream, would call for help. She didn't. She stood, looked, and said, "Now it's quiet." The room seemed to freeze. A female reporter clutched her notebook, hands trembling. A juror, in the front row, wiped sweat with a tissue. Madison, sitting 5 steps from the screen, kept looking up, head slightly tilted. When the image cut off, and the room's light returned, she gave a faint smile. Brief, but enough to make the audience behind her shudder. Ramos turned, staring at her. "Are you smiling, Madison?" Madison shrugged, replying softly, "It's just strange seeing it like that." Her words hit the tense air like ice water. Ramos held her gaze for seconds, then faced the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she says, "it's strange to watch that scene. Not one of us, no matter how ordinary, could stay calm watching our mother's death. Only someone who knows what they did, and sees nothing wrong, could smile." The jury scribbled furiously. An older man in the middle row shook his head slightly. Ramos continued. "The defense claims Madison was ill, hearing voices. But those voices don't exist in this video. There's only one voice, her real voice." She said, "Now it's quiet." And that's the only moment in the video where Madison Cole seems satisfied. She signaled to replay the final segment, pausing where Madison spoke. Ramos lowered her voice. "Look at this expression, ladies and gentlemen. Is this the face of a child in delusion, or the face of someone who got what they wanted?" Attorney Carlson stood. "Objection. This is emotional speculation." Judge Watkins nodded. "Objection noted, but the prosecution may continue within the scope of argument." Ramos gave a slight nod, eyes still on Madison. "If this is emotion, it's the only emotion she's kept." Ramos played the 911 call from Derek Cole through the loudspeaker. A man's choked voice rang out. "My stepdaughter shot her mother. She tried to shoot me too." At the end, when the operator asked, "Where's the girl now?" Derek answered in panic, "She's just sitting there. She's smiling." Those words cut through the courtroom like a slow knife. Many couldn't hold back tears. Madison sat still, hands on her lap, gaze drifting far off. Ramos turned off the audio, scanning the room. She smiled in the video. She smiled when her stepfather accused her, and she smiled when we spoke of her mother. That's not madness. That's arrogance. She stepped toward the jury, her voice sharper. "We're not asking you to judge a child. We're asking you to face the truth." Madison Cole planned, acted, and was satisfied with the result. A person with a disorder would fear themselves. She doesn't. Carlson tried to counter, saying Madison was in trauma, and her smile was a psychological defense mechanism. But no one in the room believed it anymore. They had heard, seen, and felt the chill in every frame. When Ramos concluded, she said, "You don't need to be experts to see clearly. All the evidence says one thing: this isn't fear, it's satisfaction." The judge struck her gavel, announcing a lunch break. Everyone stood silently. Madison left the defendant's table, walking between 2 officers. Passing the press, she turned, looked into a camera, and smiled again. A reporter captured that moment, the smile amid the solemn scene, after the video of her mother's death, and it would appear on the Clarion Ledger's front page the next morning, headlined, "She Smiled Again." On the 4th day's afternoon, The Lafayette County courtroom was thick as a sealed box. Everyone felt that, after yesterday's video, little could shake the jury further. But Prosecutor Victoria Ramos knew one final piece remained: Madison Cole's best friend. Judge Eleanor Watkins struck her gavel 3 times, calling the witness, Riley Martin. The right door opened, and a slim girl with low-tied blonde hair stepped in. Her pale blue school uniform made Riley look younger than her 15 years. She walked slowly, hands trembling, clutching each other. Whispers rippled through the room as people realized this was the friend Madison texted that fateful morning. Riley sat at the witness stand, gripping the microphone, eyes down. Ramos approached, her voice softer than usual. "Riley, can you tell the court about that morning? Take your time, no one's pressuring you." Riley nodded, swallowing hard, her voice hoarse. "That morning, around 8, I got a text from Madison. It said," she paused, taking a breath. "She said, 'You need to see what I did.'" A wave of murmurs swept the room. Ramos nodded slightly. "Did you understand what that text meant?" "No. I thought she was joking. Madison often said stuff like that to scare people, so I didn't think much. I just rode my bike to her house, and when you got there, the door was open. No one was in the yard. I called, but no one answered. Then I walked into the kitchen." Riley's voice broke, her hand covering her mouth. Ramos stepped closer, placing a glass of water on the stand. "Are you okay?" Riley nodded, tears streaming. "I saw blood everywhere. On the floor, the walls, and Madison was sitting there, right in the middle." She choked. The room deathly silent. She was sitting on the floor, leaning against the fridge, still holding the gun. "When she saw me," she said, "she's finally out of my way." A few in the audience gasped. The jury froze. Ramos asked softly, "Are you sure she said that?" Riley nodded, voice breaking. "I'm sure." Her voice was calm, like she'd just done a chore. Riley continued, tears flowing, voice faltering. "I screamed, asked what she'd done. Madison laughed at me, then said, 'Now she can't yell anymore.' I didn't know what to do. I was so scared, I couldn't move. She just looked at me, said, 'It feels quiet now. You should try it sometime.'" A sob broke from the victim's family section. An old colleague of Elaine's covered her mouth with a tissue, eyes red. Ramos let Riley pause, then gently asked, "Riley, what did you do next?" "I ran outside. I threw up on the porch, then called 911. But she came up behind me, whispered, 'Don't call yet. Let him find her first.'" "Him was who?" "Derek, her stepfather. Madison said he was coming home. She wanted him to see it. Then she walked away, like it was all over." Riley choked, hands shaking violently. Ramos paused, then asked slowly, "Riley, can you tell the court how Madison looked when she said those things?" Riley looked down, eyes wet. She smiled, a real smile. No trembling, no crying. She said she didn't regret it. The room fell silent. The yellow light shone on Riley's trembling face as she continued. "She looked right at me, said, 'I finally did something that matters. I've never been so scared in my life.'" At the defendant's table, Madison looked up. Throughout the testimony, she sat still, gaze distant. But as she said she didn't regret it, her lips tightened. When Riley mentioned the smile, Madison turned toward the witness stand. Their eyes met. Riley faltered, voice choking. That's the look. That look made me think she could do it again, any time." For seconds, the room held only breathing. Judge Watkins struck her gavel, demanding order, but no one dared speak. Ramos stepped forward, looking at Riley. "You did well, thank you." Then she faced the jury, her voice low and steady, each word like metal. "This isn't an accusation. This is the truth from someone who was her friend." A juror, a middle-aged man in the front, removed his glasses, wiping his eyes. Another woman stared at Madison, shaking her head slowly. Carlson stood, trying to shift the tide. He approached the stand, voice gentle. "Riley, you said," Madison smiled. "Could it have been a reaction to fear? Some laugh in shock, don't you think?" Riley looked up, eyes red, but voice suddenly firm. No, it wasn't a scared smile. It was a proud smile. Carlson paused, taking seconds to continue. Could you be mistaken? She's your friend. Because she's my friend. I know, Riley replied. I know Madison's smile when she's happy, when she's pretending, and when she wants something. That day, she smiled, because she thought she won. Carlson said no more, only bowed his head. Ramos said softly, no further questions. Riley left the stand, led by an officer. As she passed the defendant's table, Madison kept watching, her face now empty. But as Riley reached the door, Madison called softly. Riley, the room held its breath. Riley stopped, turning back, eyes panicked. Madison tilted her head, smiled faintly, whispering loud enough for all to hear. I thought you were my friend. Murmurs erupted. Ramos stood. Your Honor, I request the defendant remain silent. Watkins struck her gavel hard. Order. The defendant will not speak unless addressed by the court. Madison pursed her lips, leaning back, her smile gone. As the door closed behind Riley, no one spoke. A silence stretched endlessly. The jury scribbled, hands trembling slightly. Ramos scanned the room, her eyes cold yet weary. She knew, from the moment Riley said a proud smile, the scales had tipped. Outside Oxford's afternoon burned red in the late sun. Reporters swarmed Riley as she was led out, microphones thrust forward. Are you scared? Do you hate Madison? Riley only shook her head, saying softly, I just miss her, before she started smiling. In the courtroom, Madison sat still, eyes fixed on the empty witness stand. No smile, no defiance. For the first time since the trial began, her face looked truly young, but not innocent, just terrifyingly empty. Ramos glanced at her one last time before leaving the prosecution table, whispering to Hale, we don't need anything more. Her friend just ended this trial. The fifth day, the final day, Oxford sweltered in June's oppressive heat. But no one noticed the weather. Inside the Lafayette County courtroom, the air was thick as old smoke. Every seat was filled. People arrived at dawn to hear the outcome of a case that had sparked national debate for months. At the defense table, Stephen Carlson flipped through his file, hands slightly trembling. After Riley Martin's testimony, he knew his only task was damage control. Across the room, Prosecutor Victoria Ramos remained composed, her pen underlining the final note. Today, justice breathes. As Judge Eleanor Watkins opened the final arguments, Carlson stood, voice hoarse from sleeplessness. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, striving for calm. I know Riley Martin's testimony was painful. No one could hear it without feeling moved. But we must remember, she's a juvenile witness, deeply traumatized. She saw a horrific scene, and in that state, memory can distort. He paused, glancing at Madison. She sat still, hands on the table, expression eerily calm. Carlson continued, his voice weakening. Riley may believe, Madison said those things, but there's no audio, no video. She spoke from memory while her mind was breaking. She's in pain, and I don't blame her. But can you convict a 15-year-old based solely on another's pain? The room stayed silent. Ramos didn't move, only flipped a page. Carlson took a deep breath. We can't forget Madison Cole is a child raised under pressure. Her mother was strict, demanding perfection. Madison lost control. In a moment, a child in distress can't fully grasp the consequences of their actions. And ladies and gentlemen, justice isn't just punishment, it's understanding. He stopped, as if knowing his words were fading in a room that had heard too much truth. When Carlson sat, Ramos stood, stepping slowly to the center. Her voice was low, each word clear. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense you just heard has one goal, to make you forget what your own ears heard. She held up the file, voice rising. This is a copy of Madison's text to Riley. You need to see what I did. And this is her diary, written 2 days before the crime. Freedom is silence. Do you see? She spoke it, thought it, and did it as planned. This wasn't madness. This was intent. Ramos placed the papers on the evidence stand, moving closer to the jury. Riley didn't invent this. Riley was the first to hear Madison confess, and now, these words confirm everything she said. She wrote, she texted, and she shot. This isn't emotion, it's evidence. She turned to Madison. She doesn't regret it. She smiled when arrested, smiled watching the video, and yesterday, when her best friend cried, she still smiled. You can forgive youth. But how do you forgive that smile? The jury exchanged heavy glances. Ramos lowered her voice, saying slowly, "We're not judging a child, we're protecting the line between humanity and indifference." Elaine Cole never heard an apology, but today, you can give her what Madison Cole took, justice. No one spoke as Ramos returned to her seat. Judge Watkins nodded, signaling the jury to leave for deliberation. The door closed, and the courtroom sank into a silence taut as a wire. Outside, a storm brewed, distant thunder like ritual drums. 6 hours passed. Each minute felt like an hour. When the door opened, the jury returned. No announcement was needed. Everyone knew this was the moment. Madison sat upright, hands clasped, face calm. Ramos stood, gripping the table's edge. Carlson exhaled, eyes closing. The court clerk stood, voice trembling. On the charge of first-degree murder, the jury has reached a verdict. The judge nodded. Read it. The jury foreperson, a silver-haired woman, held up the paper. We, the jury of Lafayette County, find the defendant Madison Cole guilty, first-degree murder. Gasps and stifled sobs filled the room. Madison looked up, lips twitching, her cold gaze meeting Ramos's. The familiar smile appeared, thin as a blade. She didn't cry or protest, only turned to Carlson, whispering, "It's fine, we'll appeal." Judge Watkins called for silence, then delivered the sentence, her voice low and grave. Based on the jury's verdict, this court sentences the defendant Madison Cole to life imprisonment without parole. She will be transferred to a juvenile facility until of age to serve in the Mississippi State Prison. Madison sat still. As two officers approached to cuff her, she asked calmly, "Can I go home now?" The room held its breath. Judge Watkins looked at her long, then said, word by word, "Not today, not ever." The metal clank of cuffs echoed. Madison stood, head high, the smile still there, the smile that haunted Oxford for months. She turned to the audience, where Derek Cole sat, shoulders trembling. Ramos only watched, silent. As Madison was led away, the iron door closed behind her with a dry clang. In the courtroom, a suffocating silence lingered. The jury sat motionless, some wiping tears. Ramos bowed her head, exhaling softly. Hale placed a hand on her shoulder, saying quietly, "You won," she replied. "No one wins here, Marcus. Only loss." Outside, rain fell. The early summer downpour lashed the courthouse roof like a funeral drum. In the transport van, Madison looked through the fogged window, fingers brushing the glass. Under the faint streetlight, she smiled one last time before vanishing into the darkness of Mississippi's prison system, where the echoes of her crime would follow her forever. The story of Madison Cole, the 15-year-old from Oxford, Mississippi, who killed her mother and smiled for the cameras, is not just a personal tragedy, but a mirror reflecting the voids in American society today. In a country of busy families, academic pressure, perfectionist standards, and creeping psychological isolation, her story rings as a warning. Madison wasn't born a killer. She was raised in a seemingly stable environment, a teacher mother, a loving stepfather, a quiet town. But the silence in communication, the lack of understanding between parents and children, and the addiction to being noticed, fueled by today's social media, created a generation of kids craving control, yet unaware of the true meaning of love or boundaries. From Madison's words, "Now it's quiet," after shooting her mother, to her smiles in court, we see a dangerous emptiness, paralyzed emotions. This is happening to many American teens today, those accustomed to expressing feelings through screens, but unable to voice their pain. The lesson isn't just for parents, but for communities. Be present, listen, don't judge too soon. When a child grows too quiet or too controlling, it's not maturity, it's a cry for help. American society must invest more in school, mental health, emotional education, and safe spaces where teens can express their loneliness before it turns tragic. Because if we don't listen, one day, silence, as Madison said, will speak again through a gunshot. If you believe stories like Madison Cole's remind us to rethink how we love and listen to the younger generation, subscribe to the channel to join me in exploring real cases with lessons about humanity. Thank you for following to the end. See you in the next video, where we'll dive deeper into the dark corners of American psychology and justice.